just like that. So the tail, push all the way through till it gets to that point here where the opening is, and use the tip of the chopstick and just gently poke at the little corners and make sure that they're worked out as gently as possible. You don't want to bust through stitches. And just use the chopstick as a guide to align the material in there. Make sure that it's pulled all the way, and you'll see, even though I used white thread, it's not showing through. So use the chopstick to push the material all the way to the edges and work those edges out. So this will be nice and flat. So when that's done acceptably, I move on to this end and do the same thing. I pinch at the material here and pull it out like a pita pocket. Now I do this in the middle here, and I will push through the middle. You can do it at the corners, but I like to push through the middle. The corners are a little bit more sensitive. Go through the middle of this. And again, I will push the material through, like so. Just work it gently. Sometimes you need to rock it back and forth a little bit, and you'll see the material start to work its way through. And you're going to go through a little skinny section here. This is a little tricky, so be very careful, because there's a lot of material that you're pushing through. But you'll get to the point where it starts to come out of the little opening that we made. What I like to do is grab a hold of this where the chopstick is in here, because you don't want to bust through this. Be very, very careful with that. Hold it and pull the rest of the material through. There you go. So the chopstick is in there, not a problem, because you want it to work these edges. You want to poke out these edges like so, very, very gently. Just make sure that they're all, those points are all worked out like this. And go work that chopstick point along the edges here and work the seam from the inside. So that's one side. Flip it over, do the same thing. Start at the corner. Just work it out very gently. Remember, you only have about 1/16, an eighth of an inch to 1/16 of an inch of stitch there. And then work the chopstick along this edge. Make sure to work it out and flatten that seam on the inside. So there you go. There's already the structure of the bow tie. And we're going to press it to make it flat. But now the rest of the tail, do the same thing. Just use the chopstick to work the edge of the seam out on both sides. And then once that's done, take the chopstick out. Don't worry about this too much. We're going to press it down and we'll hide it with the stitch later. So there is already 1/2 of your bow tie. Not bad. Let's do the other side. Okay, so the tips here, as you see, snipped at a 45-degree angle, roughly. And then all these areas are cut here around the curves. All right, let's flip this inside out. Okay, now that both of these have been flipped inside out, we're going to press them. Now with these, you can very gently steam them. You don't have to have the tea cloth. Some materials you'll need to. But gently press these, making sure if you need to roll these corners with your fingers and make sure that the seam is pushed all the way out as much as possible. So I usually like to start with the tip here and use my fingers to kind of roll the seam along as I iron it. And when it gets to the little point here where you pushed all the material through, just kind of stick it in there and gently press over it and roll the material. Again, roll the seams all the way to the end. And just press it on both sides just to make sure. Nice and flat. And you can kind of use the tip of the iron to kind of guide the material and push it like so. And again here, where you have the gap, just make sure to push the material in and make it disappear like so. And you'll iron right over that. You'll iron right over this. Just push the material in like that. If the material is not perfect, if it's sticking out a little bit, don't worry about it. We're going to hand stitch it. here we go. Now let's get our little chrome tri-slides, and we're going to start to put this bow tie together. Now with Amazon, you can buy these really nice chrome tri-slides. And I forget what size they are. So the tri-slide itself is an inch, a full inch across, but the inside here I measured out with the template. So you want the tri-slide to be just a little bit smaller than the material. So I made this template, the tail, just a little bit larger because the material will fold up in here just a little bit, but it creates some friction and it makes sure that the tri-slide stays in place. So we have two, and what we're going to do is construct the bow tie so that we have the tri-slide on one end here. We'll slide it in like that. And then the other tri-slide goes on the bottom like that. So what we're doing is we're making this adjustable, and we will sew this end of the tail here with a nice thick stitch, and then the underside here we'll sew on this side. So you'll see, let's do this one and we'll show you what we mean. So on the machine, we're going to change the setting to just the crisscross stitch at the largest that it'll go. So this one only goes up to 7 millimeters. So that's how much the stitch is crossing like this. So on the back of your machine, or whichever machine you have, I slide the little button that makes it stop grabbing the material to push it through, because all we're going to do here is do one stitch like that. So the stitch is going to keep this little end of the tail. That's why I did it a point here. And I just will stitch a bunch of times to stitch across here. So you'll see. You see how it's done like that. Just enough so that point is right there at the corner where I'm going to stitch. Might need to go over about 1/4 inch or so, depending on the thickness of the material. Just make sure that it's centered, and your foot might sit on the little tri-slide here. So that's not a big deal. That's okay. There we go. So now I will simply place the needle down just to make sure. Alright, so that's where the stitch is going to go. Now sometimes you have to manually press the foot down. The material is kind of thick, so it might not catch on the bottom bobbin. So you might have to push this just a little bit, just kind of force it down, the foot, just a little bit. And make sure, yeah, see sometimes it doesn't catch. So let's start over, because the material is thick. Okay, so after pushing it down, it caught, and now you end up with a stitch like that. So just clean it up a little bit. And now you have just a nice, strong stitch that will keep everything together. So now let's lay the bow tie out again. And we're basically flipping it. So now you see we're going to take this one and do the same thing. And make sure that when you're sewing it, that the tip is going to be on the inside here. So when you see the bow tie, that tip is hidden under here. It's not a big deal, but I just like to hide that, so all you have showing is that little stitch there, which is not a big deal. You can always change the color of those depending on what you want. So it's going to be hidden within the adjustable straps, the two adjustable straps. So let's sew this end. Stitches right there. Just run it for a few seconds just to make sure it's a nice thick stitch. There you go. So now you have your adjustable tri-slides. And the little tips, again, if you need to clean this up, just do that. But now the little points, I should say, are hidden within the fabric like so. Nice and clean. You don't really see these, but it is nice to have these large tri-slides be chrome like that. Just kind of gives it a nice touch. So we are almost done. So that's the basic construction of the bow tie. So now we're going to show you how we hand stitch this closed. Now I have a really nice heavy duty, it's a polyester thread, and this one I use for all of the ties, for the stitching the back of the ties. And as you see here, this I buy, I believe this was at Joann Fabrics. And it is a heavy, heavy duty thread. It's one that I'll use to sew the lapel pins, the back of the ties, and the bow ties here. And really I don't need to double up on this thread because it's so strong. So I'll just take a small-ish needle and I'll cut maybe about a foot or so, maybe 16 to maybe 18 inches of this thread. Of course, I'll knot the end. So at the edge of the gap here, I'm going to put my thread down in here and kind of pull this out a little bit to make sure to go under it. Go all the way as close to this edge as possible, like so. So get underneath the fabric here and pull it all the way through so that you are starting at the edge of this opening. And again, this little thread here is annoying me, so make sure to cut that flush. All right, now we have the base where we're starting here. Now to keep this as hidden as possible, you're not just going to go on the outside edge here to expose the seam. You want to go as close to the inside of this edge as possible. And when you pull it together, it will hide the stitch. So go just inside just a little bit and go every 1/8 of an inch or so. And you'll see that it will bring it together like this, and now you don't see any exposed stitches. So do that the whole length of here, and just make sure that the needle is grabbing just a little bit of the inside here. So let's show you again on the other side. So here the thread is right here. Go on this side, just do 1/8 of an inch, and do that the whole length of it, and it will keep pulling all together like that. And what I do to close it off, and I know it's not traditional, is I'll simply go back through the middle here of the seam like this with the needle, and kind of go through the hollow space here, and just go a few inches, kind of curl the material, go through the hollow space of the bow tie, and find a place around here. So it's grabbing a couple of inches and pull the thread all the way through. And now the thread starts around here, comes out around here. There's plenty of it in there. It's not going to come out of that stitch. So then I'll simply snip it here, tug the material a little bit, and now it's hidden in there. And don't worry if it bumps out a little bit. Again, you're not really going to notice it. This part goes around your neck. If you're worried about it, then you can go through and make sure to have the material, be nice and straight. But this is not going to be perfectly straight anyway. It will stretch over time also. But that seam is now sewed up. So the bow tie is now complete. So as you see it here, I still have just our little logo to put on here, but we'll do that later. So let's tie it and see how it looks. So that's about the right size that I make these bow ties. That's pretty much perfect. So as you see, it has that nice corduroy texture to it at a 45-degree angle. Really nice structure, nice texture. That's the way you want them to look. All right, so that is it. The bow tie is complete. So from beginning to end, you saw how we constructed the bow tie. using not repurposed material, but new material. But that's not a problem. The same rule applies when you are using, say, a dress shirt or any other material. That is how you will construct this bow tie from beginning to end. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe and click on that bell. That way you get notifications when our videos come out. And yeah, I'm really happy with this and how it came out. Now this will be for sale on our Etsy account. So check out the link below and you can purchase this exact bow tie right on Etsy. So I hope you guys have a great day and we'll see you next time.